Hi everyone, my name's Simon and I'm a grateful recovering addict. Not just born to be the centre of attention. I don't mean that at all. I'm working hard on my steps to let go of that as a desire and a need in a way. But public information is my thing, right? Really early in my recovery, someone took me to an area committee and I was like one of those little clockwork dogs that you wind up and stick on a table and it just runs off until it runs out. And I've been like that ever since, really. The principle of service rotation is something very painful for me to accept because I feel like I'm just getting good at something when it's time for me to move on. So I'm going to share my screen and show a few slides. I'm not going to make this too slide heavy. What I really want to do is give you some idea of how we got to where we now are in the UK. And I'll keep it as short as I can so that you can ask stuff, because I think often the best information is delivered through questions. Okay. So what happened was in 2008, some people from the UK, the regional committee. The UK is one region, okay? That includes England, Scotland, Wales, and historically the north of Ireland, although Ireland is now its own separate region. We found that the Quebec community in Canada, the French-speaking community in Canada, who were coming to our European zone because there were no other French-speaking people around the world. So they joined with France and came to our European zone for 5 or 6 years and before they formed their own region. They had developed a 5-year public relations, public information plan. So we took it and translated it and adopted it, okay? So essentially, here we go. So what essentially it did was it divided the outside world into a series of audiences that we felt we could divide into groups, okay? And we targeted those specific audiences. So the audiences were addicts and family members, government, social services, healthcare professionals. The police, probation, prison and judiciary all came under criminal justice eventually. We realized we had a lot of different communities we wanted to reach, okay? The committee was made up of the standard kind of executive, chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, and these 5 officers, okay? The media rep dealt with media and press inquiries and would respond to them either directly or refer them to an area committee if it was geographically specific. The training officer would train area PI committees to deliver, but it also would do training within the regional committee. Fellowship liaison is the point of contact between our membership and our committee flow. Government liaison is the point of contact between government and our committee and other area committees. And then the events coordinator. And that was the role that I took on because what we did as a committee was the job of the events coordinator was to create a diary of events that we could attend as a PI committee. So rather than wait to be invited, because we have friends out there, we actively pursued involvement in these events. So there were certain criteria. It needed to be a national profile event. It needed to have more than 1,000 attendees. And we needed to be able to get a financial break on the price. Mainly because these can be very expensive. I don't know whether any of you are involved in conferences or exhibiting professionally, or whether you've done it in terms of your service work, but exhibiting at a conference, a national conference, can be some thousands of dollars to have a stand, to have a booth. Often what they will then do is break that down. You've got to rent furniture from them. You've got to rent electricity from them. The signboard at the front has got to be made by them. So these can be very expensive. One of the most important things I've learned in all of my many years of doing service is that everything is an opportunity for public information, everything. So calling up exhibition coordinators and explaining why we are not a charity, because we don't qualify under the Charities Act in the UK, because to qualify you have to accept donations from anyone who offers them, and we obviously can't do that because of our 7th tradition. But we are a charitable organisation, so our aims are charitable, but we're not legally registered as a charity. So we tend to attempt to persuade them to treat us the same way, and often they do, because it tends not to cost them any more to have us there, and it tends to be beneficial to them to have us there, not just for the clients who are the conference participants, but also in terms of their own profile. It looks good when an organisation has someone like NA attending. Okay, right. My normal control. So what I've done is I've just assembled a few slides here of events that we have participated in, or events that I was events coordinator for. Okay, this is one we did a lot of, the Royal College of General Practitioners, which is essentially the medical professional. Nurses have their own conference, but essentially everyone else within the medical community can join this college. And so it's a very big conference and a very important conference strategically in terms of Narcotics Anonymous. So it's a very important audience for us. National Offender Management Conference. This is essentially criminal justice. It comes under probation, but many of the people who attend this conference come from all sorts of areas within criminal justice. So you get a lot of senior police officers coming, senior probation officers, prison officers used to come, prison governors used to come, another very important audience for NA, and it was a very good conference for us. Someone forgetting that he needs to be anonymous. God, I look so young in 2009, thin, handsome, with hair. This is the National Drug Treatment Conference, another very important audience for us. I think it's important to bear in mind that, as in America, funding for drug and alcohol services, centralized government, federal, if you like, federal funding or state funding, during this period for us, so during the noughties, from about 2002 to 2010, it reached over £1 billion. That's $1.33 billion was being spent on drug and alcohol treatment. We had worked, not just NA, but lots of organisations that we work alongside, had worked hard to encourage the government to understand the idea that £1 spent on treatment would save £8 or £9 to society. You know, government savings in health service, healthcare, criminal justice costs, prison costs, probation costs, family court costs. So investing in drug and alcohol treatment paid dividends. The difficulty is those dividends are invisible, and taxpayers don't like giving money to addicts. So this money rose, but now, you know, it went from about 1.1 billion to it's in the tens of millions now. I mean, it's been devastated. Funding has been devastated, partly by a recession, certainly by a pandemic, but more than that, by a kind of an ideological position that as politics moves to the right, I don't want to get into outside issues, but I think it's quite important as a PI committee and someone working in PI, I know I can see how the world is. And there's no doubt that the money has fallen through a hole in the floor. So these conferences, Royal College of General Practitioners again, this was a good conference, very friendly conference to NA, because a lot of the exhibitors there and a lot of the conference participants ran treatment centers. A lot of American treatment centers would come here and advertise their wares and look for custom. I think they also brought their wives to do shopping in London, but this was a very big conference, very friendly conference for us. Royal College General Practitioners again and again. Okay, when my term of office ended in 2012, the money that we had been spending on this, which was in the region of $5,000, $6,000 a year, it was deemed by the new committee to be too much. They decided that it wasn't worth doing this. And, you know, one of the great lessons of personal recovery is understanding that silence is a spiritual principle, and allowing a conscience to be enacted. You know, I disagree with it, but I was a small voice in a larger committee. So essentially, we now don't do big national conferences. The 5-year plan has not been looked at since the year of 2016. It's now starting to be looked at again. I left the regional PI committee for some period of time. I did a lot of work at the zone, at the European delegates meeting. I was their PR chair and then their fellowship development chair. And so I moved to do service there, really. I sponsor people who do PI. And if they're not doing PI when they ask me to sponsor them, they're certainly doing it by the time they've got to their 5th step. Because you know, no, I don't think that's entirely true, but I certainly encourage them to get involved in service. And I think this is the best service there is. I just think this is the best thing. When I listen to Bikash talking about how much of a struggle it is in Hong Kong, it just makes me realize just how damn lucky I am. You know, I have a good education, I had a good family, I went into an institution that was paid for by my government. I found NA there because it was allowed in. You know, I've visited Manipur, which is in a closed state in the northeast of India, where addicts are shot. Addicts are illegal. You know, people don't say you don't say you're an addict there. It's taken a long time for meetings to even be possible. So what has now happened is a sponsee of mine has now become the chair of the Regional Public Information Committee. And we're now revisiting the 5-year plan. We're revisiting attending conferences. If you look carefully at the bottom left of this picture, you'll see it says Merseyside area. So even though on the banners, they use the national helpline number, this is from an area, this is essentially Liverpool, that's where my sponsee lives. So they are doing really great work in and around Liverpool and Merseyside, Manchester and Liverpool, where they're doing a lot of very active public information work. So, quick time, I've really lost track of time. Okay, so that's kind of, I think that's all my slides. I think that I mean I'm really happy to converse with anyone who is wanting to do this, wants to know more about doing this. Whilst half an hour is a real opportunity, it's like a finger click in terms of the quantity of information that people need, and that I have, that you as a fellowship have awarded me by trusting me to do this work over the years I've been in recovery. And I've learned loads. And the truth is that, you know, knowledge that I have learned that I don't get to share with people is kind of wasted. So I'm really happy to share it with anyone who wants it. The second of those 2 email addresses, training@pi.ukna.org, will get to me. I'm the UK trainer. So I'm really happy to answer questions, and I think that's probably the best way to carry on. But listen, I really appreciate being invited here. People used to tell me to go away. People used to cross the street and look in shop windows when they saw me coming to watch my reflection go past, because they didn't want to engage with me because I was going to hustle them for money. Right? And I'm in a place now where I'm loved and respected and invited to do stuff like this, man. God is good. Thanks for listening.
Okay, Leslie.
Yes, hi. I just really want to ask a really quick question. As far as PI over in Jamaica, I see a lot of areas are having like Zoom meetings and stuff. But how is PI in Jamaica, and is there any meetings as far as like in Jamaica? That's one of my questions, because I see you guys are everywhere, and I'm driving, so I'm hoping I'm not breaking up. I just wanted to ask that question.
Malvina, you're probably better. Are you better placed to answer that? What do you reckon?
Well, Leslie, Simon is, the UK is not including Jamaica at this point. I mean, here's what I know.
I get it.
I mean, here's the thing. I know that over in the Caribbean, I'm familiar with the PR chair of Bermuda, and I guess the other different islands. I could just open that up to the floor if there's anybody here from the Caribbean that could speak to that specifically.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for the question, Leslie. Anthony?
Addict named Tony. Thank you so much, everyone, for your service. I greatly respect Wilvina, Bikash, Simon, Jamie, the ones I know anyway. I'm sure you're all doing a great job. I'm in and out of PR for a few dozen years. So what was interesting to me about the 5-year plan is I'm not really so much into the professional conferences and carrying the messages to third parties. I'm more of a, how can we directly carry the message to the addict who still suffers? But what was intriguing is in the Northeast, there is a rather large fair where there's 1 million people who attend this thing called, oh man, now I have the name messed up.
The Big E.
Yeah.
The Big E.
The Big E. So this was one of my hopes and dreams. Like 10 years ago, I wanted NA to get together and get a booth. And now I am seeing that other regions and other areas were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Jesus, 1 million people attend this fair. We could get the word out that we exist, and maybe addicts will pick up literature. But what we didn't have was a 5-year plan. And I know Wilvina has made big strides, and so has Rob from Pioneer Valley. And it's just stressing, yeah, you have to write letters. You have to say what value you provide to the community. And I'm really wondering, is there a way, Simon, that we could review some of your timeline materials about how you wrote letters or templates, or how can we better use your best practices to get together and build our 5-year plan to get NA into this Eastern States Exposition? Thanks.
Sure, it's a great question, Anthony. I personally made a quite pragmatic decision quite early in my recovery, and I remember sitting in a meeting when I made it. Someone said, there are people walking by outside this meeting. They don't know we're here. Right? I will take some responsibility for getting that message to them. And actually, the reality is, when I go to speak to a group of doctors at a conference, each of those doctors will meet tens or 20s or hundreds of times more potential members than I will. And if I get a doctor turned on to who we are and what we do, my ambition at a conference is to get the participants of the conference to attend an open meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. In many ways, it's no different to what I would with someone who's seeking recovery personally. I'd say to someone who can't stop using, try and get yourself to a meeting. And I'd say to a professional who works with addicts, try and get yourself to an open meeting. And the reason for that is because I think our power is in our stories. And I think that when people see what happens in meetings, suddenly that short circuits the kind of received information about us. You'll get some of this later. I see Wilvina's going to be doing things on, mis and misinformation stuff. They think we're cultish. They think we're religious. They think we're predatory. They think we're all of those things that have come from somewhere. And I can overcome that, and I can speak to a doctor, and I can turn him on to who we are and what we do, and he will tell hundreds of people about NA. I meet a treatment professional, and he will tell hundreds of people about NA. So that was a pragmatic decision I made early on. In terms specifically of your question, there is in Poland every year I've become a bit of an expert on Polish NA because of a woman who I love, who sits in a room downstairs, who happens to be the Polish RD at the moment. There is a festival there called Woodstock, and it's based on the idea of the original Woodstock, but it has 150,000 rock fans in Poland who go every year, and it was started as a charitable organization. It's run as a charity, and NA Poland now have a booth and a tent there, which is funded by the organizers. And they get 5 or 6 passes for members from the PI committee to go and staff this booth. They run a tent. So they'll run recovery meetings in the tent. It took a long time to convince the organizers they were not the people who were going to deal with overdoses. You know, they think we're from NA, right? Someone's got overdosing, we'll send them to NA. So it took a while for them to understand that our role in that community is to help people who have reached the end of their road and wish to make changes, right? But now that's understood by the organizers, and they have a very well cemented place at that festival. I think there's huge potential for growth around all sorts of festivals, not just the Big E, but any stadium size, you know, weekend long festival, having NA as a presence there, not just for the people who come through the front door, but for performers, people who are in the enclosed area, in the acts, you know, a lot of performers who are finding their way into recovery, running meetings by the local community for members who are performing at festivals is also a really important service to offer.
Now, Simon, listen, not to cut you off, because I want to make sure I get Paul's question before the top of the hour. Go ahead, Paul. I could listen to you all day, by the way.
Thank you. So could I. Thank you, Wolvina. My name's Paul. I'm an addict. Thank you for putting this on today. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Simon. It was when you mentioned politics and having the perspective, it got me thinking, you know, and our so-called right-wing government here in the UK announced on Friday £80 million worth of funding for prisoners being released into treatment should they want it, right? And it's kind of maybe putting you on the spot. I mean, it's interesting that you say that people doing PR should have perspective and know the political landscape. Now, I know traditionally jails, prisons, we think H&I, but I was just wondering, without you knowing maybe too much about what's happening, could you see a way of PR kind of slotting itself into a situation like that, for example?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good question, Paul. Part of what we do as a national committee, as a regional committee, is make strategic decisions within our 5-year plan. There is a government liaison, and they sit on 2 different parliamentary groups. You know, the advisory committee on the misuse of drugs. We have someone, you know, a member sitting on there. They are an expert by experience. They're an NA member. So it's clear that they can't say many things. They can't take a position. They can't have an opinion, but they can be a sounding board for a lot of stuff. I sat on that committee for 3 years on behalf of UKPI, and I spent a lot of time saying, we don't take a position on that. We don't take a position on that. But there were times when I would say, this is about people. This is not about money. This is about people. If you'd like to know more about how we work with people, we're really willing to help. So no, you're absolutely right. And there is a way for NA to be involved strategically. And we need to be speaking at government level. And that's what a national committee will do, or a regional committee, or a zonal committee will do. You know, the European Zonal Public Relations Committee spoke at the European Union last year in Brussels. They presented to the ministers at Brussels and got a really good reception. Our power is in our stories. This works. We don't need to say we're better than anyone else. We just need to say we've found a way that works. And it's a hugely attractive proposition. Oh, and we're free. These are good
Simon,
things.
that is absolutely fascinating, because here in the United States, we have not taken advantage of sitting in these government positions or agencies to not only be a placeholder and for awareness purposes, but I think in the United States, because of the misconception about NA not having you know, an opinion or a stance that we have not, you know, operated effectively as you have in the UK with letting the government know these very important issues, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for that, because we are planning a virtual conference for government, and these things that you mentioned, and we may be calling on you again for help, or either to sit in as a presenter, because we're not reaching many of these government people, and we know that funding is being drastically cut. So that was so vitally important for you to give us that perspective.
That gives us an advantage. That gives us an edge. They cut funds, we're free.